Well, let's talk now to Professor Sampson Mamphweli. He's an energy expert and director at the Center for Renewable and Sustainable Energy Studies at Stellenbosch University. Prof, good evening and thank you so much for your time tonight. There are very interesting details that have come out today, at least on the part of the president, in terms of the kind of interest that he had by way of Optimum Holdings and the stake that he had in Optimum Holdings in as far as Glencore is concerned. Firstly, perhaps just a surface reading of your own impressions of the transition the president made between being a non-executive chair of Optimum, then becoming deputy president, then overseeing the Eskom war room, and having, through the majority of that time, Optimum involved in this scandal with Eskom through Glencore.
Good evening, Kathy, and the viewers. For me, I've listened to the testimony by the president, and I think he made it quite clear. Because if we look at the various pieces of legislation, there doesn't seem to be anything untoward that the president may have done. I think the decision for him to disinvest from Optimum was a good one, and it was in line with the relevant pieces of legislation. Now, the challenge that the other witnesses brought on board of the issue of the war room, for instance, in terms of Eskom's own memorandum of incorporation, government as the only shareholder has got the right to access to information. And the president, who was then the deputy president, who didn't have any interest at Optimum at that particular time, had to chair kind of that war room that was supposed to have received information from Eskom and then assist Eskom with kind of a turnaround strategy. So from where I'm seated, and I've followed this quite extensively, I don't think there was anything untoward. And the other issue, which is the main aspect, is the non-executive nature of the president when he was the chair of Optimum, because he was not involved in the company operations as he says it himself. So what has not come out is somebody coming out to say this is exactly what the president did in his capacity as the chair of the war room, which then favored either Optimum or any other coal supplier to Eskom. So that we have not established so far. And I think from listening to the president today, I think he's quite vindicated in this particular case, in my view.
If we go back to the evidence of Brian Molefe and why he had brought the president up, one of the things that Brian Molefe was saying, even though he wasn't overtly accusing the president of any wrongdoing, he did suggest that Glencore could well have been under the impression that due to the nature of the relationship, the pre-existing relationship between itself as an organization and the then deputy president, that he would use his position to influence matters at Eskom. And all of this really goes back to the price of coal, because Glencore was trying to sell coal to Eskom at these exorbitant amounts, amounting to about just around 6 billion rand. And when you look at the argument then, with the context of today's evidence, does somebody like Brian Molefe have a case when he says that Glencore could well have thought there was a way in which the then deputy president would have influenced or tried to sway things in their favor, despite the fact that he no longer had an interest?
I don't think Mr. Molefe had a strong case there, Kathy, because the biggest issue there is we all know that the then deputy president had a number of business interests in the energy space, for instance. And when Mr. Molefe was testifying, I listened to him, he also failed to provide evidence to say, because for him it's more of a thought to say this company sold these shares to the deputy president, and afterwards this is what the company wanted to do. So by inferring without providing hard evidence to say this is exactly what the president, this is exactly what the intention was on the side of Glencore on one hand, and the president, who was the then deputy president, was also as a party to that transaction, aware of the intentions of Glencore to conduct themselves in a way that they went on to conduct themselves. So it's quite difficult because the president, as he said himself today, he acquired the shares in line with all the relevant pieces of legislation, in line with the provisions of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So if somebody has gone through that process and he ends up and everything else that Optimum ended up doing it without his participation, that somebody can prove beyond reasonable doubt, I think it becomes unfair to the president for anyone to infer that simply because he was a known politician by then Glencore made him an offer. The one thing that we don't know also is whether Glencore made the president an offer or the president assessed the situation and made a decision by himself that he was going to acquire the 9.4% shares at Optimum.
Prof. Mamphweli, let's leave it there.